Oh, hello. My name is Mara, and welcome to Books Like Whoa. So I don't think that this is a video that people are like clamoring for me to make, but it's something that I just had to talk about because I really love this book. This is a book that it's a rare case where I would recommend almost anybody read it, particularly any of my fellow Americans to read it. And I just want to talk about it and give it whatever level of visibility boost I can give it. The book that I want to talk to you guys about today is Stamped from the Beginning by Ibram x Kendi. This is a book that I had as an ebook, but that I primarily listened to as an audiobook. And that was a really good experience for me, a good way for me to take it in small doses and kind of digest it that way. So if you like audiobooks, that's something that you might consider doing. But the reason that I really want to highlight this is because this is one of my favorite intellectual histories I've ever read. And it is an intellectual history of racist ideas specifically in America. Now, Kendi starts roughly in the 1400s, particularly with some of the explorer countries like Portugal and Spain, the origin of some of those ideas there. He alludes to some of the origins of racist ideas. I should specify, by the way, that we're talking about racist ideas against African people. And he somewhat goes back into the ancient origins of some of these ideas. That is one area that I wish he dug in a little bit more. And actually, they're specifically talking about like objectifying Black women's bodies. Like there are things going back to like Roman and Greek writings, talking about like enlarged genitals and like fetishizing that. And like there's like a whole history of racist ideas that goes back literally thousands of years against people who are essentially dark skinned and originally from the continent of Africa. Like there's just a lot there. So I wish that he'd gone into that a little bit more. I totally understand why he didn't in terms of like saving some of his energy for later. But anyway. So I really enjoyed, the parts of this book I probably enjoyed most were the beginning. So like he really gets into talking about like where these specific types of ideas about intellectual inferiority, physical superiority, and moral inferiority, like where a lot of the roots of those ideas that have kind of been handed down to us come from. And I really appreciated that he spent a lot of time talking about that. I also really loved everything he did, essentially like Reconstruction era onward. I think that those were the two most compelling parts of the books, and that just may have been kind of like my personal biases because I always like seeing sort of the origins of ideas. And then he gets into some kind of like more recent applications of that history. But anyway, basically this is an intellectual history that does a really good job of placing origins of ideas in context, at time and place, location, all that. People, like the people who were promoting various ideas and responding and playing with various ideas. He does a really good job of sort of mapping all of that out and kind of giving you a constellation of people and ideas, how they interact. And I think that this is a great book in terms of setting you up to do more digging on your own and more reading on your own. And I think intellectual histories that do that are doing their job. You know what I mean? Like they give you sort of a roadmap of places that you could go, ways that different ideas interact with each other, different kind of threads you can take. And I think this book did a really good job of doing that. I think he also did a really good job of giving me just some language that I may have heard a little bit of, but I made some notes while I was listening. It was like, ooh, just some language that I think was really helpful in kind of talking about various racist ideas. And I really appreciated that he named them as racist ideas, even if they sound palatable or sound more positive than other racist ideas. They often, these are still racist ideas. So one idea, two kind of like correlated ones that he used is uplift suasion and media suasion. And both of these are different kinds of sort of racial apologetics of like selling the white majority that the Black minority has valuable things to contribute to society or valuable, like, or just inherently valuable. So media suasion is more specifically kind of talking about the ways that Black culture has been appropriated or just like channeled into mainstream media. And this idea of like, okay, Black excellence in, for instance, a great example of this is The Cosby Show, right? Black excellence in these certain arenas, like that's going to lead to acceptance. Similarly, Uplift Suasion is kind of talking about exceptional Black people who are going to prove to white people that, hey, you know what? Not all Black people are conform to the racist ideas I have. Maybe I should rethink this. Another kind of word for Uplift Suasion that you hear a lot is respectability politics, but I liked the language of Uplift Suasion. And respectability politics, I mean, there's so much to be said there, and I think that Ibram Kendi does a great job of sort of breaking down why that's never going to work, and why we've seen from history that's never going to work. Not just, by the way, not just for racial minorities, like women, if the last presidential election did not teach you that you will never be respectable enough to be safe from you know, a lot of violence and discrimination and purposeful disenfranchisement, like anyway. Maybe I should just cool my jets on that, but like, essentially this book demonstrates, at least in this specific case study of Black Americans' experiences, like why that just doesn't work and will never work, and is a racist idea, or a sexist idea, fill in the blank. So I really like that. I like that he talked about assimilationist racism versus segregationist racism, and I think that's really helpful terminology. Okay. A little correction here, because I think I got myself a little bit mixed up. I think what I was trying to talk about were a couple of different levels of assimilationist racism. The first being more insidious, and the second one still being racist, but less like, it's like more sneaky, basically. The first kind of assimilationist racism says that Black people will over time be influenced by white society to become like literally physically quote unquote whiter. I don't even know what that means, but also like morally and intellectually. So like this weird, like nebulous whiteness will somehow be transmuted to Black people. So like that is a much more like overtly racist idea. But there's also then a more insidious version that says Black culture will be assimilated into white culture. That is a little more sneaky, because I think sometimes people don't realize that it's a racist idea. Okay, back to the video. So I think that that was really helpful, sort of like, it's hard to sort of talk about like levels of racism or like levels of maliciousness of racism, but I think that that was a really helpful kind of terminology that he uses throughout that really, I really liked. So there was definitely a lot of moments of just like new kind of ways of talking about ideas that I found really helpful, those being some of the most prominent ones. I also really liked that I think he was very purposeful in trying to call out moments where, essentially intersectional moments, so where he would talk about gender and racism, or queerness and racism. I think he tried to find moments to talk about that. I personally would have liked to see more, but there was enough in there that let me know that was something he was thinking about, and it made me curious, and like I would love, like if I could call him up and ask for a book rec, I would say like, hey, can you give me like a book recommendation on intersectional, like this history, like an intellectual history of Blackness and gender, or Blackness and queerness. And I'm sure they're out there, I just need to do a little digging, but that was something I would have loved to see even more of. But the way he spoke about that, I was really appreciative of, and I could tell that his head was there in terms of like, I want to call out places where, essentially what Brittney Cooper would talk about, she talks about this in Eloquent Rage, which is another as good, that is another 5-star book, and I don't think I'll get time to review it, but let me just say here, you should read it. And she talks a lot in that book about Black feminism, and she's essentially talking about this dynamic where Black men are put in a position, they are in this patriarchal cycle where they're trying to be the patriarchs that white men are, and they measure that by how below are they from white men and how above are they from Black women. And that creates a really unhealthy dynamic within the Black community, because there's a lack of recognition of those dynamics happening, and she talks about that in a really great way. Anyway, all that to say, I really liked those moments in the book, and I would have loved to see even more, but it just makes me curious that I need to just go on my own little rabbit hole of learning more about that. And then just some general just like history moments that I was like, that I remembered and connected with from this book. I really loved hearing specifically about Cotton Mather and Richard Baxter's racism, because there are specific parts of specifically American theology that have like a real love affair with the Puritans, and I think have a real blindness to the realities of that theology. And its noxiousness in terms of practical implications for real humans. And this is a great example. This book lays out very plainly how Cotton Mather was instrumental in creating a theology that not only allowed slavery to happen as it did in the US, but like wanted it to, promoted it, needed it, like exhorted it. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't just like passive, like, this is how we justify it. It was like, no, this is a good thing and here's why. So like, I liked learning about that. And the next time some theology fanboy tries to come at me and talk about how great, I'm not going there with that. So I really liked hearing about that. I did really like hearing more about some of the women throughout Black history who've had like real philosophical weight, or have had really interesting voices in terms of like where different movements should go. In particular, I liked hearing about Zora Neale Hurston. I didn't realize that she was so thoughtful in terms of like moving forward Black progressivism. I liked hearing about Angela Davis. I'd always heard a little bit about her. I knew of her vaguely, but the whole last section is sort of told from her point of view. Really enjoyed that. Ida B. Wells is a fucking badass. Like, she was awesome. I loved hearing about her. And then Sojourner Truth. I think I'd read the Ain't I a Woman speech before, but hearing in the audiobook someone speak it, I was just like, yes, queen. Like, this should be, like, I want to memorize this now. Like, I really do, because it's just so powerful and beautiful and just like, I loved it. So I loved any moment where I was getting more Black women standing up and like being like prophetic voices. That's really what I want to call them, because like a lot of times they were, I think because of the intersectional kind of element, able to like see things in a different way and call things out. So that was really good. And then I also liked, that's a weird word for this, but I was horrified / aggrieved to learn about contraband camps during the Civil War. I don't even think I can do it justice describing. Look that up. Also the fact that Native American slaveholders were the only ones who had to pay reparations during Reconstruction era. Like, just the layers of bullshittery in there is just like insane. So that was fascinating. And then, you know, I think like one of my takeaways, because like he kind of walks through some of the like insane Supreme Court decisions that get made over the course of American history with regard to Black people and slavery and all these different things. And it was a real reminder to me that like things can get crazy and completely bullshit at very high levels of the government. But like, the optimist idealist in me believes in my heart that Black people have come out of the slave cabins, women have come out of the kitchen, like gay people have come out of the closet, like, and we're not going back. So like, I believe even when things get crazy and scary and wrong, I have to believe that we're moving towards progress. And even when really bleak decisions get made about things, and like, let me tell you, when they're walking through some of these Supreme Court decisions, you're just like, but how though? We eventually it's righted to some degree, like in very small measures, like we slowly, like I have to believe that. I have to, you know, Dr. King talks about like the arc of history is towards justice, or I can't remember the exact quote. I have to choose to believe that because the alternative is too bleak. But hearing about some of those decisions, kind of like, that was what I chose to take from it, was like, but that did get corrected eventually. Like, that was a worst case scenario decision and eventually it was overturned. So like, we have to just keep believing and keep working. Like, that doesn't mean we're passive. Like, that means we work towards it. But like, anyway, that was sort of one of my takeaways. Anyway, I just thought that this was a really helpful history. If you're at all interested in this topic, I would 100% recommend this. This is something I would recommend, again, really to any American, because I think that it's a really, I mean, it may be introductory level for some people, but I just think it does a really nice job of kind of placing different people, places, ideas in relationship to one another and kind of showing you how they're connected and moving you forward in time with these various kind of intellectual through lines. I think it just does a really nice job of that. And I love this book, and I felt really humbled and kind of challenged by a lot of the things that are in it, in terms of just like the bottom line is, I'm a white woman and I am the beneficiary of a system that is set up against a lot of people to my benefit. I do feel like it's incumbent upon me to educate myself, and I'm trying to do that to the best of my ability. You don't have to feel defensive or threatened in doing that. Like, it's enlightening and I think empowering, because I think more and more over time I'm learning what it means to be an ally and to be aware of how these different dynamics come into play, and then find ways to be an active ally. That's one of the biggest things we can do in these times. So anyway, I absolutely love this book. This was a 5-star book for me, one of my few I've had this year, and I would just absolutely recommend this to anybody who has any interest in it. Like I said, I think the audiobook works quite well. Not that it's, I should say this isn't like narrative nonfiction that it's like super compelling in terms of the writing being super compelling, but I think the subject matter is so compelling that it moves the writing. Like, you're interested in the history, your attention is held very well by it, and it moves along at a nice clip. So like, I enjoyed that experience if that's something that you're into. Anyway, this was sort of just like a gush review of why I would love more people to read this. This is, I mean, this is not an obscure book by any means, but I think that this deserves a lot of eyeballs on it, and I would love to see even more people giving it their eyeballs. I don't, like, this got real weird and body party, and I'm just gonna move away from that. Okay, so anyway, thank you for watching this. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below. I think that will do it. Hope you're having a really great day, and I will just talk to you soon. Bye!